Intercepted log, galactic compact field intelligence. Classification, veiled amber unrestricted analysis, restricted distribution. Origin node, listening post Caldera 9 outer Pelith reach. Intercept date, compact standard 4417.291. Content, personal audio journal, encrypted burst packet source vessel registry fallow him, human flagged, independent, operator Marin Ortega Vaz, human female, age 38. Analyst note, flagged for cross-reference with ongoing compact inquiry into unauthorized settlement activity on Kelvon 6, coastal sector 11 west. Context, Kelvon 6 is a Class 4 rewilding preserve under Compact Environmental Charter. No habitation permits have been issued for the surface since evacuation of the Sethani colonial remnant, Compact Standard 4409. The planet's apex predator population, armored coastal ambush hunters designated Threshari, has been under active recovery monitoring. Unauthorized human presence in the Threshari breeding corridor constitutes a charter violation. The following entries have been translated from audio to text. Redactions are minimal. Tone, personal, informal, increasingly urgent. Entries span approximately 190 local days. Entry 1, Day 3. The nav loss was my own fault, and I will not pretend otherwise. Running a calibration patch on the fallow him's guidance core while still inside a debris belt is the kind of decision you make when you have been awake for 30 hours, and your last meal was a protein bar consumed standing over a console with your free hand. The patch crashed the primary, the backup stuttered, and by the time I got manual thrust online, the him was already caught in Kelvon 6 gravity well. I burned what I had. I aimed for the biggest landmass. I hit water first, then rock, then something that felt like all the bones in my spine compressing into a single vertebra. The pod separated clean. The him is in the shallows about 40 meters offshore, half sunk, her starboard hull cracked open like an egg. I can see her from the beach. The tide is doing things to her that I would rather not watch. The beach is volcanic sand, black, fine-grained, hot under the morning sun. Behind it, jungle, thick, canopy so dense the light comes through in shafts, everything green on top and dark underneath. The air smells like salt and rot and something sweet I cannot identify. The coast runs in a jagged line of basalt cliffs to the north, and to the south, the jungle spills right down to the water line. I have the emergency kit. I have the med pack. I have the long-range transmitter, which took a hit during impact and is currently producing a sound I would describe as optimistic static. I have about 14 days of compressed rations if I am careful. The compact beacon is broadcasting my crash coordinates on the distress band. Someone will come, probably. Entry 2, Day 7. Something is watching me. I noticed on Day 5. I was gathering driftwood along the tide line. The wreck sheds useful material every time the waves pull at her, and I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement. A pressure, the way you feel someone's eyes on the back of your neck, in a room you thought was empty. I turned. Nothing. Jungle wall, dense and still. But the birds had stopped. And when the birds stop on a world with this much canopy, it means something bigger is holding still. I kept working. I did not run. Running invites pursuit, and I do not know what is in that jungle yet. Day 6 I found the tracks. Barefoot, small, bipedal. 5 toes, but the print is narrower than a human child's, and the stride pattern is shorter than the foot size would suggest. Whoever made them was moving cautiously, placing each step with deliberate care. The tracks came out of the jungle, crossed the wet sand between the wreckage debris and my shelter, circled my fire pit, and returned to the tree line. I measured them with my multi-tool. The foot is roughly 12 centimeters long. There are no authorized inhabitants on Kelvon 6. The compact evacuated the Sethani remnant 8 years ago. But someone is here. Entry 3, Day 11. I left food out last night. Not the compressed rations, those are mine and I am counting every calorie, but I caught something in the tidal pools. A crustacean the size of my fist, hard-shelled, the meat dense and briny. I cooked 3, ate 2, and left the third on a flat rock near the tree line. This morning the rock was clean. The shell was placed neatly beside it, cracked open with something sharper than fingers. I left another tonight. Entry 4, Day 14. Her name, if I am interpreting the sounds correctly, is something like Thale. She told me this on Day 12, or rather she told the dark space between the last tree and my fire, because she would not step into the light. She is Sethani. She is, by my best estimate, in her middle adolescence, old enough to move through this jungle like she was born in it, which she probably was, young enough that the wariness in her posture has not hardened into hostility. She is thin, not starving thin, but lean the way something gets when it has been feeding itself with effort and without surplus. Her skin is a deep blue-gray, the color of wet basalt in the morning, and it shifts shade depending on the light, darker in shadow, almost silver in direct sun. Her ears are large, pointed, mobile, they track sounds independently, and when I speak, they both swing toward me with an attentiveness that makes me feel like I am being listened to, with a precision no human conversation has ever achieved. Her eyes are pale amber, enormous, they catch the firelight and hold it. She wears a garment made from something she processed herself, plant fiber, layered and bound with thin cord made from what I think is dried vine. Over her shoulders is a cape of some kind, and it took me 2 days to realize it is not plant material. It is Threshari hide, cured, scraped, still carrying the faint pattern of the creature's dorsal plating. The Threshari are the reason the compact evacuated this world, apex ambush predators, armored, semi-aquatic. They breed in the coastal corridors, and they are not friendly to anything that occupies their territory. This child is wearing one of them as a coat. I have questions. Entry 5, Day 19. She brought me a fish today. A whole fish, gutted, cleaned, laid on a broad leaf and placed at the edge of my camp while I was working on the transmitter. I did not hear her arrive. I did not hear her leave. I looked up and there was a fish. It was expertly prepared. The cuts were clean and even, made with a blade I have not seen. I cooked it, and it was the best thing I have tasted since the crash. I am beginning to understand something. This child is not surviving on Kelvon 6. She is living here. There is a difference. Surviving implies endurance against odds. Living implies that the odds have been renegotiated. Thale moves through this environment the way a current moves through water, not fighting it, not yielding to it, just flowing with a competence that makes the jungle look like a place she designed. The transmitter is still producing optimistic static. I have extended the antenna using hull scrap from the wreck, but the signal is weak and the debris belt is thick. I am beginning to consider the possibility that 14 days of rations was an optimistic estimate of rescue timing. Analyst interjection. The following entries are summarized for brevity. Full transcripts available on request. Days 2040. Ortegavas establishes a stable camp. The Sethani adolescent designated Thale, per Ortegavas's transliteration, begins appearing at the camp perimeter during daylight hours. Gradual trust building is documented. Food exchanges become reciprocal, then cooperative joint fishing, shared cooking. Ortegavas notes the child's sophisticated knowledge of local flora, fauna, tidal patterns, and weather systems. Of particular interest, Thale demonstrates awareness of Threshari territorial boundaries, migration patterns, and behavioral cues that the compact's own ecological survey teams have not documented to this resolution. She appears to have developed a survival methodology based on prediction and avoidance of the apex predator, supplemented by, per Ortegavas's increasingly incredulous notes, some form of negotiated coexistence. This claim is flagged for verification. Compact ecological records classify the Thresciari as non-sapient apex predators with no documented interspecies tolerance behavior. Resuming primary transcript. Entry 12, Day 43. I am going to describe what I saw today, and I need to be precise because I am aware of how it sounds. Thale took me to the river mouth. The inland river empties into the sea through a channel cut between two basalt walls, maybe 15 meters apart, and the water runs fast and cold. The channel is deep, I could not see the bottom, and the current pushes a column of silt and nutrients into the coastal shelf, which is why the tidal pools near my camp are so productive. The Thresciari use this channel. I saw 3 of them, adults. Each one is roughly 4 meters long from the armored head to the tail ridge, built low and heavy with articulated dorsal plates that flex as they move. Their legs are short relative to their body mass, adapted for bursting from concealment, and their forelimbs end in hooked claws designed for anchoring prey. The head is broad, flat, with a jaw structure that could shear through hull plating. Their eyes are forward-facing, predator eyes. They were in the channel, positioned in the current, doing something I can only describe as fishing. They were not hunting each other. They were not patrolling. They were stationary in the current, mouths open, catching the fish that the river pushed past them. Thale walked to the edge of the basalt wall above them and sat down. She sat there, legs dangling over the edge, 10 meters above 3 apex predators, and she began to hum. The Thresciari did not react with aggression. One of them, the largest, tilted its head upward in her direction, its jaw closed, its dorsal plates flattened, which I later learned is a relaxation posture, not a threat display. It regarded her for approximately 5 seconds, and then it returned to its fishing. Thale reached into the woven bag she carries and pulled out something, a collection of hard-shelled parasites, each the size of a grape. She dropped them into the water, one at a time, and the largest Thresciari caught them in its mouth with a precision that belied its size. She was feeding it. She was feeding an apex predator, shell parasites the way a farmer feeds grain to a draft animal, and the creature accepted the exchange with what I can only describe as familiarity. Thale looked at me. Her amber eyes were calm. Her ears were relaxed, angled slightly outward, a Sethani expression I have come to read as something between amusement and patience. She said a word I did not recognize. I asked her to repeat it. She said it again, slower, and pointed at the largest Thresciari. The word was Vethon. She used it the way someone introduces a neighbor. Entry 13, Day 48. I asked Thale today, in the pidgin we have been building from Sethani root words, trade common fragments, and a truly heroic amount of pointing, how long she has been alone on Kelvon 6. She held up both hands, 10 fingers, then she lowered all but 2, then she opened all 10 again. 12 years, if a Kelvon year is roughly standard. She was evacuated with the Sethani remnant as an infant, and she does not remember it. What she remembers is the ship. The transit ship that was supposed to carry the evacuees to a resettlement facility on Verath Station. The ship broke, she said. A Sethani word, not a trade common one, and the way she said it, flat, uninflected, the way you state a fact that has been a fact for so long it has lost its capacity to wound, told me everything. The ship suffered a catastrophic failure in transit. How many of the evacuees survived the initial event she does not know. What she knows is that a lifeboat reached Kelvon 6 surface. Several adults were aboard. They kept the children alive. She thinks there were 4 children, herself included, for some period she cannot quantify. One by one the adults died. Injury, illness. A Thresciari attack during the first wet season, when the creatures pushed inland, and the adults did not yet know the patterns. The other children died too. She does not say how. She says their names, Kel, Sareth, Peven, and when she says the last one, Peven, Her hands go still in her lap and her ears fold flat against her skull, and I recognize the gesture because I have seen it in the mirror. Pevin was the last. Thale was alone after Pevin. She was perhaps 4 standard years old. She has been alone for 8 years. I am sitting by the fire as I record this and my hands are shaking, and it is not from the cold. Entry 14, Day 52. I need to talk about the Thresciari and Thale and what I think is actually happening, because my initial framework was wrong and I owe the record a correction. The Thresciari are not non-sapient. I am increasingly certain of this. They may not be sapient in the way the compact defines it, tool use, symbolic language, abstract planning, but they possess behavioral complexity that the ecological surveys missed entirely, probably because the surveys were conducted from orbital platforms and armored ground hides with a 2-week observation window, which is like studying human culture by watching a parking lot from a helicopter for an afternoon. The Thresciari have social hierarchies. They have territorial negotiation rituals that do not involve combat. They have something that looks like cooperative hunting in some contexts and territorial avoidance in others. And the difference between the two is subtle body posture, dorsal plate angle, a low-frequency vocalization that I can feel in my chest but cannot hear with my ears. Thale can hear it. Her ears are built for it. She reads Thresciari body language the way I read a ship's instrument panel, fluently, without conscious translation, reacting to shifts in posture and sound that I do not even register. She did not tame them. I want to be clear about that. What she did was something stranger and I think more remarkable. She learned their rules. She learned what the Thresciari consider a threat and what they consider neutral. She learned their boundaries, spatial, temporal, behavioral, and she operates within them, not as a subordinate and not as a master, but as something for which I do not have a word. A neighbor who knows the fence lines. A tenant who pays rent in parasite removal. She cleans them. I watched it yesterday. The largest Thresciari, Vethon, Thale's name for it, which I suspect is not a proper noun but a status designation meaning something like the one who holds the channel, hauled itself onto a basalt shelf at low tide, and Thale climbed onto its back and spent 40 minutes picking parasites from the joints between its dorsal plates. The creature lay still, its breathing slowed, its eyes half closed. When she finished, it pushed itself back into the water without looking at her, and Thale climbed down and walked back to me with a bag full of parasites, which she later dried and used as bait for the deep-water traps she maintains along the reef shelf. This is mutualism. Documented, sustained, cross-species mutualism between a Sethani child and a population of apex predators that the compact classified as dangerous megafauna. It developed because a 4-year-old, alone, with no adults and no framework except desperation, observed the world around her and built a relationship with it. I have stopped trying to fix the transmitter, not because I do not want rescue, because I want to understand what I am looking at before someone comes and disrupts it. Analyst interjection, entries 15 through 22, days 53-91, document the deepening cohabitation between Ortega Vos and the Sethani adolescent. Key developments summarized below. Select entries reproduced in full. Resuming primary transcript. Entry 15, day 55. Thale made a decision today and I was not consulted. I woke at dawn to find her dismantling my beach shelter, pulling the tarp off the driftwood frame, rolling it into a bundle, stacking my salvaged tools into the supply crate. She did this with the brisk, unsentimental efficiency of someone packing for a move she has already planned in detail, and is now executing on a timeline that does not include my input. I stood there in my socks, holding a cup of water, and said, "What are you doing?" She pointed into the jungle. "Inland uphill." "Thresciari come," she said. 2 words in our pidgin, but the way she said them, not with alarm but with the flat certainty of someone stating a tidal schedule, told me this was not a warning about a specific predator. It was a calendar entry. The Thresciari would be coming to the beach, seasonally, predictably, and we would not be on the beach when they did. She led me through the canopy for 2 hours. The path she chose avoided 3 territorial markers that I would have walked straight through, scent posts, scratching grooves on specific trees, a low basalt wall where she pointed out claw-worn channels in the stone, and said boundary with a gravity that made the word sound like a law of physics. The new camp is on a natural shelf in the mid-canopy zone, elevated 6 meters above the forest floor on a platform of interlocking root structures from a tree species whose trunk is wider than my arm span. Thale had been building here. Not recently, for years, by the look of it. Lashed platforms, woven rain screens, a covered storage area with ventilation gaps positioned to catch the prevailing wind, a gutter system carved into bark that channels rainwater into a stone basin. She built this when she was 9, or 10, alone with tools she made from shell and stone and Thresciari bone. I set my crate down and looked at the structure and felt something I will call awe, because humility does not quite cover it. My contribution, she informed me through a combination of pointing and disapproving head tilts, would be improving the water filtration. Apparently, my mechanical skills have been assessed and assigned. Entry 17, Day 62. The education goes in both directions. I am teaching Thale trade common. She absorbs vocabulary the way dry wood absorbs water fast, deep, with structural consequences. Her grammar is eccentric. She builds sentences the way she builds shelters. Functional first, elegant later, always load-bearing. She asked me the word for wrong yesterday, and by evening she had used it 14 times, each application precisely targeted. The wrong knot for this rope, the wrong time to check the traps, the wrong pitch when I attempted the low-frequency Thresciari greeting. Thale is teaching me the jungle. Specifically, this root is edible when boiled. This bark strip makes cordage stronger than anything in my emergency kit. This insect carries a venom that will make your arm swell for 3 days. This path is safe in the morning, impassable during the spawning runs because the Thresciari subadults use it as a transit corridor. She teaches by demonstration. She walks and I follow. She stops and I stop. She looks at me with those amber eyes to confirm I have registered the lesson, and if I have not, she repeats it without impatience. I asked her today how she learned all of this. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, I watched, and I did not move. The ones who move first, they choose what they will see. The ones who are still, the world chooses what to show them. She was 8 when she figured that out. A child, alone, who understood that the most powerful thing she could do was nothing. Entry 18, Day 67. Transcriber's note. This entry begins with 9 seconds of silence. My hands are steady. My hands were steady the whole time. Why were my hands steady? The storm came in fast. One of the subtropical convergence cells that Thale can usually read from cloud patterns 2 hours in advance. But this one built behind the ridge and dropped over us without warning. Rain so heavy the canopy could not shed it fast enough, waterfalls pouring through gaps in the leaf cover, the platform slick and treacherous. Thale was out, checking the lower trap line, which runs along the base of the cliff face near the river mouth. She does this in weather because the storm drives prey into the shallows and the traps fill. She told me to stay. I stayed. I am learning to listen. 20 minutes into the storm, a Thresciari came to the camp. Not Vethon, a subadult male, smaller, maybe 3 meters long, its dorsal plate still carrying the mottled coloring of adolescence. It pushed through the undergrowth at the base of our platform tree and it stopped, and it looked up, and its forward eyes locked on me. I did not move. I did not breathe. My hands were on my knees and they were steady. The creature's dorsal plates rose, threat display. Its jaw opened slightly and I could see the layered rows of shearing teeth, designed for cutting, not crushing. The sound it made was below the range of my hearing, but I felt it vibrate through the platform, through the tree trunk, through my kneecaps. I did the thing Thale taught me. I lowered my chin. I averted my eyes, not fully, not a submission posture, but a disengagement. I opened my mouth and produced the low vocalization she had drilled into me for 3 days until my throat ached, the one she called the still sound. A sustained, soft, low-frequency tone that communicates neutral intent. The threshary's dorsal plates flattened, slowly, one by one front to back like shutters closing, its jaw closed. It held my not gaze for perhaps 5 seconds longer, and then it turned, not quickly, not in retreat, just a redirection, and pushed back into the undergrowth. It did not look back. I sat on the platform in the rain and my hands were steady, and I do not understand why, because my heart was trying to escape through my ribs. But Thale had trained the body even when the mind was screaming and the body held. Thale returned an hour later with a full trap line. She looked at the tracks at the base of the tree and said, "Kiveth, the young male, he is curious." She paused. "You are still here." I said yes. She nodded. "Good, he will remember." Analyst interjection. Remaining entries 1922, days 72-91. Document continued integration. Notable, Ortega constructs improved fish traps using salvaged hull components, increasing catch yield by approximately 40%. Thale begins incorporating Ortega into the parasite removal mutualism, first as observer, then as assistant. Ortega removes shell parasites from a subadult female threshery under Thale's direct supervision, entry 21, day 84. The entry notes, "My fingers are too thick for the smaller joints." Thale watches me fumble and does not correct me, because she understands that competence is built through failure, not instruction. She learned this from the jungle, or the jungle learned it from her, and at this point I am not sure which came first. Resuming primary transcript. Entry 23, day 97. Thale is sick. I noticed 3 days ago. She was slower coming out of the tree shelter in the morning. Usually she is up before me, already moving, already checking the tide pools and the trap lines with that fluid economy of motion that makes my 40-year-old joints feel like rusted hinges. But 3 mornings ago, she sat on the shelter platform for a long time, her hands resting on her knees, and when she finally climbed down, her movements were careful in a way that was not caution but effort. Her skin color has shifted. The blue-gray has taken on an undertone I have not seen before, greenish, dull, like old copper. Her ears move less. When she speaks, her voice is thinner, and she pauses between words as though the act of forming them costs her something. I open the mid-pack. The diagnostic scanner is calibrated for human physiology, and it told me what I already knew. She is not human. But the thermal readings showed elevated core temperature, and the basic blood draw, she let me take it, which surprised me, because she does not like being touched, and I have respected that boundary absolutely. Showed cell markers I could not identify acting in ways that the scanner flagged as anomalous. I do not know what is wrong with her. I do not have a Sethani medical database. I do not have a Sethani anything, because the compact evacuated this world and then apparently lost the transit ship and then apparently stopped looking. She ate half her food today and set the rest aside. Thale never sets food aside. I am scared. I am using that word deliberately, for the record. Entry 24, day 101. The fever broke this morning and she drank an entire liter of filtered water and ate everything I could prepare. I am sitting outside the shelter and I am crying, and I do not care if that is in the record. 4 days. 4 days of grinding my teeth and running every fever protocol I know, which is designed for human fevers and may have been entirely useless. But I packed cold cloths around her, and I kept her hydrated, and I sang to her, which is absurd because I cannot sing. But she seemed to respond to sustained vocalization the way the threshery respond to low-frequency tones, and I would have stood on my head and juggled rocks if I thought it would bring her temperature down. On the second night, the largest Threshari, Vethon, came to the camp. It has never come to the camp before. It pushed through the undergrowth at the perimeter and it stopped 10 meters from the shelter and it lay down. It did not approach further. It did not vocalize. It lay in the dark with its armored head facing the shelter, and it stayed there until morning. It came back the second night too, and the third. On the fourth morning, when Thal's fever broke and she climbed down from the shelter on shaking legs, she walked to where the Threshari was lying. She put her hand on its dorsal plate, the first one, behind the head, the one I have seen her clean dozens of times. The creature's eyes opened. It made a sound, low and brief, and Thale made a sound back, and then she sat down with her back against its flank and closed her eyes. I stood 20 meters away and watched a child lean against an apex predator the way a child leans against a parent's leg, and the predator adjusted its breathing to match hers. I am not objective about this. I have stopped pretending to be. Entry 25, Day 109. The transmitter is working. I did not intend to fix it. I was cannibalizing the antenna array for structural materials. Thale and I are expanding the shelter system, and I accidentally reconnected a coupling I had previously disconnected during an earlier repair attempt. The coupling was not the original problem. The original problem was a fractured signal amplifier that I replaced with a scavenged component from the HIM's secondary comms array 6 weeks ago. That replacement was imperfect but functional, and with the coupling reconnected, the unit is broadcasting a clean distress pulse on the compact emergency band. I estimate the signal will reach the nearest relay in 8 to 12 days, depending on debris belt interference. I should be happy. I am not happy. I am sitting by the transmitter and looking at the green pulse light and feeling something that I can only describe as the opposite of relief. If the compact comes, they will find an unauthorized human on a protected rewilding preserve. That is a charter violation. The fine is the least of it. They will remove me, and they will do it efficiently and without argument. If the compact comes, they will find a Sethani adolescent living on a world she was supposed to have been evacuated from 12 years ago. They will classify her as an unprocessed remnant. They will designate her for resettlement. They will put her on a ship and take her to a station and assign her a case number and a temporary housing module and a cultural integration officer who does not speak her language because her language is a pidgin she built herself from Sethani roots, Threshari behavioral cues, and the sound of waves on basalt. They will take her from the only home she has ever known. They will take her from the Threshari, who will not understand where she has gone. They will call it rescue. I turned the transmitter off. Then I sat in the dark for an hour. Then I turned it back on. Because she was sick 4 days ago and I could not help her, and the next time she is sick might be worse. And the time after that might be the time I cannot fix with cold cloths and singing. She is 14 years old and she is alone on a planet with no medical infrastructure. And the fact that she has survived this long through sheer competence and the mutualistic tolerance of apex predators does not change the fact that she is a child, and she deserves better options than a crashed pilot with a half-functional medpack. The signal is broadcasting. I cannot take it back, but I can decide what happens when they arrive. Analyst interjection. Entries 26 through 31, days 110-140 document Ortega Voss's preparations. She compiles observational notes on the Threshari Sethani mutualism, behavioral logs, sketched territory maps, tidal pattern correlations, dietary analyses, totaling approximately 40,000 words of field data. She teaches Thale rudimentary trade common at an accelerated pace. She also begins teaching Thale about the compact, what it is, how it operates, what it will want to do when it arrives. Of particular significance, Entry 29, Day 128, documents the first conversation in which Thale expresses understanding of the concept, "They will take me away." Ortegavas's audio for this entry is heavily fragmented, long silences, false starts, controlled breathing consistent with emotional distress. The transcript reconstruction is as follows. THAL, they come, they see me. They say this one is not supposed to be here. Yes. ORTGAVUSS, yes. THAL, they see Vethon, the others, they say these are dangerous. This child is in danger, yes. ORTGAVUSS, yes. THAL, but I am not in danger. ORTGAVUSS, I know. THAL, you know they will not know. ORTGAVUSS, no, they will not know. THAL, long pause, then what do we do? ORTGAVUSS, we show them. Resuming primary transcript. Entry 32, day 143. The compact survey vessel medial corrective dropped out of orbit this morning. I watched the shuttle break atmosphere from the clifftop above our camp. A clean white contrail against the amber sky, regulation perfect descent angle, the kind of landing approach that says, we have done this 1,000 times, and we are very confident about our procedures. 2 officials. One is a compact environmental compliance officer, a Kethani male named Torvan, tall, rigid posture, his 4-fingered hands clasped behind his back in a way that suggests he is already composing his report. The other is a species welfare assessor, a human woman named Dr. Lyon Chesick, mid-50s, gray hair pulled back, expression carefully neutral, the kind of face that has been trained not to react. They found my camp. They found the shelter system. They found the fish traps and the water filtration and the fire pit and the organized tool storage and the 40,000 words of field notes neatly compiled on a datapad I salvaged from the hymn. They found Thale, who was standing behind me with her hand on my arm and her ears flat against her skull. Torvan's first words were, "You are in violation of Compact Environmental Charter, Section 14, Subsection 3, unauthorized habitation of a designated rewilding preserve." I said yes. His second words were, "The Sethani individual is an unprocessed remnant of the 4409 evacuation. She will be transferred to Verath Station for processing and resettlement." I said no. I have never said no to a compact official before. The word felt different than I expected. It felt like the first time I struck a match. Entry 33, day 147. Torvan is a bureaucrat and he is not unkind, but he is a bureaucrat, and that means he sees the world as a system of categories, and a 14-year-old Sethani living alone on a predator-rich rewilding preserve does not fit any category that his system accommodates. She is not an evacuee, she was never processed. She is not a colonist, no permit exists. She is not wildlife, she is sapient. She is not a ward, no guardian has filed. She is by his system an error, and errors are corrected. Dr. Chesick is different. Dr. Chesick has been reading my field notes, and this morning she asked me to take her to the river channel. I took her, Thale came with us. The 3 Thresari were in the channel fishing. The largest, Vethon, was on the basalt shelf basking. Thale climbed the cliff path without slowing. She dropped the shell parasites into the water, one by one, and the subadults caught them. Then she climbed onto the basalt shelf and sat beside Vethon, and the creature's dorsal plates flattened, and its breathing shifted to that slow, deep rhythm I have come to recognize as contentment. Dr. Chesick watched this for 11 minutes without speaking. Her datapad was in her hand, but she was not recording. She was just watching. When she finally spoke, she said, "The ecological survey classified them as solitary ambush predators with no documented interspecies tolerance." I said the ecological survey was wrong. She looked at me. Then she looked at Thale, who was picking parasites from the joint behind Vethon's second dorsal plate, humming a low melodic phrase that the Thresari's breathing had already synced to. Yes, she said, I can see that. Entry 34, day 152. Torvon filed his preliminary report yesterday. I know because Dr. Chesick told me, and what she told me turned my stomach into a fist. The report recommends 1. Removal of the unauthorized human me with standard charter violation penalties. 2. Transfer of the Sethani remnant Thale to Verath Station for resettlement processing. 3. Continuation of Kelvon 6 rewilding designation without modification. 4. No follow-up ecological study regarding the Threshari behavioral observations, which are classified in the report as anecdotal and unverified. 4 lines. He reduced 8 years of a child's survival, her relationship with the ecology of an entire coastline, her mutualistic bond with a species the compact does not understand, and her right to remain in the only home she has ever known, to 4 administrative lines in a compliance report. Dr. Chesick filed a counter-assessment. I do not know exactly what it said, but she spent 3 hours composing it, and when she came out of the shuttle she looked like someone who has put her professional reputation on a table and pushed it toward the edge. She told me 2 things. First, she has recommended that Kelvon 6 designation be amended from Rewilding Preserve to Active Ecological Study Site, which would permit a limited human research presence. Second, she has recommended that Thale be classified not as an unprocessed remnant, but as a primary cultural contact. The first documented individual to achieve sustained coexistence with the Threshari, which would give her legal standing to remain as a subject expert consultant rather than a displaced minor. It is a bureaucratic maneuver. It is a recategorization. It is the kind of thing that only works if the people reviewing it care more about the novelty of the science than the neatness of the paperwork. I asked her why she was doing this. She looked at me for a long time, and then she said, because I watched a child sit on the back of an apex predator and hum it to sleep, and if that is not worth protecting, then I do not know what my job is for. Entry 35, day 158. Torvon challenged the counter-assessment. Of course he did. His argument is procedural. A species welfare assessor does not have the authority to recommend ecological designation changes. That falls under the Environmental Compliance Division, which is his jurisdiction. He is not wrong about the jurisdiction. He is wrong about everything else. Thale asked me today what will happen if the tall one she calls Torvon, the tall one who counts, makes her leave. I told her the truth. I told her that if the compact orders her removal, I do not have the authority to stop it. I am a crashed pilot with no institutional standing and a charter violation on my record. I cannot overrule a compact compliance officer. She looked at me with those amber eyes, and her ears rotated slowly forward, which is a Sethani expression of concentration so intense it borders on scrutiny. Then she said in trade common that she has been learning at a pace that humbles me. You stayed when I was sick. You stayed and you sang, and the singing was terrible, and you stayed. I laughed. I could not help it. You are my Vethon, she said. I stopped laughing. Vethon, the one who holds the channel, the one who stays in the current and does not leave. She was not calling me a predator. She was calling me the thing she trusts most, the creature that does not move, that does not flinch, that accepts the parasites picked from its back and breathes in rhythm with the one who tends it. She was calling me the thing she leans against when she is tired. I am going to fight this. I do not know how. I do not have jurisdiction or authority or institutional standing. But I am Marin Ortigavas, and I crashed on this planet by accident, and I stayed on purpose, and this child is not an error to be corrected. She is proof that something remarkable happened here, and I will not let 4 lines in a compliance report erase it. Entry 36, day 163. Dr. Chesick has been recalled to the medial corrective for a jurisdictional review. Before she left, she gave me a copy of her full counter-assessment on a sealed data chip, and told me to transmit it on the open academic band, not the compact administrative channel, but the research publication frequency that universities and independent science foundations monitor. I asked her if that would get her in trouble. She said probably. I asked her if she was sure. She said that child renegotiated the relationship between a sapient species and an apex predator population using nothing but observation, patience, and the willingness to sit still long enough for something dangerous to decide she was not a threat. If I do not make sure someone outside the compact bureaucracy knows about this, then I have wasted 30 years of field work. I transmitted it, 40,000 words of field data, behavioral logs, territory maps, tidal correlation charts, the whole record. The academic band is slow, but it is wide. By the time the compact's jurisdictional review is finished, every xenoecology department in the arm will have Thales' story on their desks. Entry 37, Day 171. 3 ships arrived yesterday. The first was a compact enforcement cutter, Torvon's reinforcements, or his superiors, or both. The second was a research vessel from the Kailshi Institute of Xenoecology. Dr. Chesik's transmission found its audience faster than I expected. The third was a small courier that I did not recognize. The courier carried a single passenger, a Sethani woman. Old, I cannot estimate Sethani ages with precision, but her skin was the pale blue-white of deep winter ice, and she moved with the deliberate care of someone whose joints have been carrying her for a long time. She stepped off the courier onto the black sand beach, and she stood there, looking at the jungle, and her ears trembled. Her name is Rathan Sorrel. She is a member of the Sethani Remnant Council, the governing body of the evacuees who were successfully resettled on Verath Station. She came because the transmission reached the Sethani community, and when they read it, they learned something they had not known for 12 years. The transit ship that broke, the one that carried Thale and the other children, was listed as lost with all hands. The compact filed the report. The Sethani mourned. They built a memorial. They spoke the names of the dead into the silence, and they closed the record. Thale's name was on that memorial. Thale's name was among the dead. Rathan Sorrel came to see the child who was supposed to be dead. She came because a crashed human pilot transmitted 40,000 words of field data on an open academic channel, and buried in those 40,000 words was a name that should not exist. She is standing on the beach right now, looking toward the jungle. Thale is in the tree line. I can see her, a shadow between the trunks, her ears forward, her body still. She is looking at the old woman the way she looked at me on the first day, with the absolute focused attention of someone deciding whether this new element is threat or neutral. I want to go to Thale. I want to stand between her and the uncertainty and hold it at bay until she is ready. But this is not my moment, this is hers. Entry 38, Day 172. Thale walked out of the jungle this morning. She walked out slowly, barefoot on the black sand, the Threshari hide cape over her shoulders, her woven clothing catching the morning light. Her amber eyes were fixed on Rathan Sorrel, who stood at the waterline with her hands clasped in front of her and her ears trembling so hard the tips blurred. Thale stopped 3 meters from the old woman. She looked at her the way she looks at everything, with patience, with attention, with the willingness to wait until the shape of the moment becomes clear. Rathan said something in Sethani. Old Sethani, not the pidgin Thale speaks, formal, musical, with inflections that Thale's ears tracked but her expression did not recognize. Thale tilted her head, her ears rotated forward. Rathan tried again, slower. And then, when the words still did not land, she did what I should have expected from a species whose ears are their most expressive feature. She hummed. Low, steady, melodic. The same kind of sustained vocalization I had used when Thale was sick, the same kind Thale uses with the Threshari. Not words, music, a frequency that means something older than language. Thal's ears relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. She took one step forward, then another, and then she was close enough that Rithan could have touched her, and Rithan did not touch her, because the old woman understood the way I had learned to understand that you do not reach for Thal. You hold still and you wait, and you let her come to you. Thal put her hand on Rithan's arm. The old woman's eyes closed. They stood like that for a long time. Entry 39, Day 178. The jurisdictional review is over. I will give the short version. The compact enforcement team wanted to remove Thal and fine me, and restore the preserved designation. The Kailshi Institute wanted to establish a long-term research station to study the Threshari-Sethani mutualism. The Sethani Remnant Council wanted Thal returned to them on Varath Station. Dr. Chesik wanted Thal to stay on Kelvon 6 with protected status. Torvon wanted his paperwork to balance. Thal walked into the hearing, which was held on the beach, because no one could agree on whose ship to use, and she listened to all of it through the translation device Dr. Chesik had provided, and when they asked her what she wanted, she said, "I want to stay in the channel." Nobody understood except me. I translated. She wants to stay here, on Kelvon 6, in the place she knows. With the Threshari she has spent her life learning to live beside. She is not asking to be rescued. She is not asking to be resettled. She is asking to be allowed to remain in the only home she has ever had. Silence. Then Rithan Sorrel spoke. The old woman had been sitting quietly through the entire hearing, her pale ice-blue hands folded in her lap, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who has outlived enough foolishness to recognize it instantly. This child survived the loss of her people. She survived the loss of every adult who was supposed to protect her. She survived alone, on a world you sealed away, with nothing but her own mind and the willingness of the creatures around her to let her live. You did not find her. She found herself. And now you want to correct her as though she is the mistake. Rithan stood. I came here to bring her home, but I see now that she is already home. The question is not what we do with her. The question is whether we are wise enough to let her stay. Entry 40, Day 190. The ruling came down today. Kelvon 6 has been redesignated. The rewilding preserve status remains, but a new classification has been appended. Integrated Coexistence Site, Category 1, the first in compact history. The designation permits a permanent research station, staffed jointly by the Kailshi Institute and the Sethani Remnant Council. Thal is classified as resident subject expert and primary ecological consultant, with full protected status under the Compact's indigenous knowledge protocols. Torvon filed a procedural objection. It was noted and archived. Dr. Chesik has been appointed station director. She accepted before the transmission finished. Rithan Sorrel is staying. She moved her things from the courier into the new shelter compound yesterday, and she is learning the tidal schedule. And this morning I saw her standing on the basalt cliff above the river channel, watching the Threshari fish, with an expression on her old Sethani face that I can only describe as wonder. As for me, Marin Ortegavas, pilot, charterer of the vessel Fallow Him, salvage pending, convicted charter violator. My fine was suspended on Dr. Chesik's recommendation. My crash site has been designated as a historical marker. My 40,000 words of field notes are being cited in 3 separate academic papers that are not yet published. And Thal calls me Vethan. I do not know what I will do next. I know that I will not leave yet. The station needs a mechanic, and I am told that the fish traps I built require regular maintenance, and there is a subadult Threshari on the South Reef Shelf that has started approaching the camp perimeter at low tide, and Thal thinks I should be the one to learn its boundaries, because, as she put it, you are slow, but you are patient, and the slow ones are the ones the young trust first. She is 14 years old. She has been teaching me how to live on a planet since I crashed here, and she is still teaching me, and I am still learning, and I think that is what staying means. End of intercepted log. Analyst final note. The audio journal of Marin Ortega-Vaz has been entered into the permanent record of the Kelvin 6 integrated coexistence site. The compact inquiry into unauthorized settlement activity has been closed. The ecological classification of the Thresciari has been amended from non-sapient apex predator to high-complexity social megafauna with documented interspecies mutualism capacity. The Sethani individual designated Thale remains on the surface. Dr. Chesik's original counter-assessment, which precipitated the redesignation, contained a single handwritten annotation in the margin that was not included in the official filing. She did not conquer the jungle, she listened to it, we could learn. Field Intelligence declines to comment on the annotation's relevance. The file is closed. But the file was never quite closed, because files are paper and Thale was not paper, and what happened next did not fit in any report. 3 months after the ruling, a storm came. Not the seasonal squalls that Thale navigated with a certainty that bordered on prescience. This was a convergence event, 2 pressure systems colliding over the equatorial ridge, driving a wall of weather across the coastal shelf that the station's meteorological sensors flagged 12 hours in advance, but could not adequately characterize. The models were calibrated for Kelvin 6 normal weather. This was not normal weather. The wind reached the camp at midday. Thale was in the tree canopy when the first gusts hit, checking a trap line she had strung along the upper branches of a massive broadleaf colony, and Marin was at the station shelter, sealing the shutters and helping Rathan secure the research equipment. Dr. Chesik was in the communications module, trying to raise the medial corrective for an updated satellite feed. Marin heard it first, not the wind which was already screaming through the canopy, but the sound underneath it, a low-frequency vibration that she felt in her sternum before it reached her ears, the Thresciari alarm call. Every armored body on the coastal shelf was producing it simultaneously, a coordinated subsonic pulse that rolled through the ground like a slow heartbeat, and Marin had spent enough time with Thale to know what it meant. The water was coming. Storm surge. The river channel would reverse under the pressure differential, pushing seawater inland through the basalt corridor and flooding the low ground where the camp sat. The Thresciari knew because the Thresciari had survived 1,000 storms on this coast, and their alarm was not for themselves, they were semi-aquatic, built for water, but for the territory. The call said, "The ground is about to change. Move." Marin ran for the canopy. She found Thale already descending, moving through the branches with a speed that no amount of practice would give a human. The child's ears were flat against her skull, not the contemplative flatness of deep thought, but the compressed flatness of urgency. She dropped the last 3 meters to the forest floor and landed in a crouch and looked at Marin, and her eyes held something Marin had never seen in them before. Not uncertainty, not fear, assessment. Thale was calculating. "The shelter," Marin said, pointing back toward the camp. "We need to get everyone to high ground." Thale shook her head. "Not the shelter. The shelf." She pointed inland, toward the basalt formation that jutted above the canopy a quarter-kilometer to the east, the same shelf where Vethan basked at low tide, raised 10 meters above the flood plain. "Can we make it?" Thale was already moving. They made it. All of them, Marin carrying the emergency kit, Rathan moving with a grim determination that belied her age, Dr. Chesik with 2 datapads clutched to her chest, and Thale leading them through the jungle on a path that no map showed, a path she navigated by reading the tree growth patterns and the sound of the wind through different canopy densities, a path that existed only in the encyclopedic knowledge of someone who had spent 8 years learning every meter of this coast. The water came 20 minutes after they reached the shelf. It came through the river channel first, a brown surge that swallowed the basalt walls and spread across the low ground like a slow exhalation. And then it came from the sea, driven over the beach by the storm surge, carrying debris from the wreck of the fallow hymn, and depositing it across the camp like a careless delivery. The shelter survived. The station equipment, sealed and elevated, survived. The tree canopy trap lines were destroyed. But the danger did not end with the water. The surge had displaced the Threshari from their coastal territories, pushing the population inland into compressed corridors where boundaries overlapped and tolerance frayed. The subadults were the first to become agitated. Marin could hear them, multiple low-frequency calls layering over each other in dissonant patterns that Thal's ears tracked with increasing tension. "Kivith," Thal said, "the young male, the curious one. He is close. The adults are pushing him and he has nowhere to go." Marin heard the crash of undergrowth below the shelf. Something large was moving through the flooded forest, not with the deliberate patience of a territorial transit, but with the erratic energy of an animal that had been displaced and was looking for ground to claim. Rithan moved closer to the center of the shelf, her old hands gripping the stone. Dr. Chesick put her body between Rithan and the edge. Marin stepped forward, putting herself at the lip of the basalt, looking down into the churning brown water and the tangle of submerged vegetation. The Threshari broke the surface 8 meters below them. Kivith, she recognized the mottled dorsal plates, the adolescent proportions, the same creature that had come to her platform months ago in the storm. But he was different now. His plates were raised in full display, his jaw working, his body twisting against the current with the frantic muscle of something cornered. Behind him, deeper in the flood, a larger shape moved, an adult, plates locked high, vocalizing at a frequency that made the shelf vibrate under Marin's boots. A territorial challenge. In the confined flood corridor, with the subadult trapped between the shelf wall and the adult's position, the geometry was lethal. Thal moved before Marin could process what she intended. The child descended the basalt face in 3 moves, a drop to a ledge, a swing around a root hold, a controlled slide down the final wet surface, and she landed knee-deep in floodwater at the base of the shelf. The current pulled at her legs. The Threshari hide cape floated behind her like a sail. "Thal," Marin's voice cracked across the distance, raw, stripped of every professional control she had ever practiced. The word was not a command. It was a plea. Thal did not turn. She was already producing the vocalization, not the still sound that she had taught Marin, but something deeper, more complex, a sequence of tonal shifts that rose and fell in a pattern Marin had never heard before. It was not a greeting. It was not a calming signal. It was a boundary declaration. Thal was drawing a line in the water with her voice, telling both Threshari that this space, the shelf, the rock, the creatures on it, was held. Kivith's plates lowered first, one by one, front to back, the way Marin remembered from her own encounter. The subadult turned its head toward Thal, and something passed between them that Marin could not quantify, recognition, perhaps, or the memory of a small figure on a platform who had held still and hummed, while he decided whether she was threat or neutral. He was deciding again, and again the answer was neutral. The adult hesitated. Its plates remained raised, but the vocalization shifted, the aggressive frequency dropping, the pattern losing its sharp edges. It was not backing down. It was recalculating. The presence of the Sethani in the water had introduced a variable that its territorial algorithms did not account for, something small that was not prey and not competitor and not threat, something that simply stood in the current and held its ground. Thal held. The water rushed past her legs. The rain hammered her shoulders. Her ears were forward, locked on the adult, and her amber eyes did not blink. The adult's plates flattened. It turned. It moved downstream into the deeper flood corridor, yielding not the territory but the confrontation. The subadult followed, keeping distance, its adolescent plates still half raised but its trajectory no longer desperate. Thale stood in the water for another 30 seconds, her vocalization tapering to silence. Then she turned and climbed the shelf, and when she reached the top, Marin grabbed her and held her and did not let go for a long time. "You could have been killed," Marin said into the child's wet hair. "No," Thale said. "Kivith knows me. The big one does not know me, but it knows what I am. It has seen me before on the basalt. It has heard me before in the channel. I am part of the territory. It will not fight the territory." She said this with the calm certainty of someone stating a law of nature, and Marin held her tighter, because the child was right, and because being right did not make her less 14 years old, and because fierce protectiveness does not operate on logic. It operates on the sound of your own voice cracking across the distance when the person you would die for steps into the water. Rithan was weeping. Silently, her pale ice-blue face turned away, her ears pressed flat, her old hands shaking against the stone. She wept the way old women weep when they see something that terrifies them and awes them in equal measure. The competence of a child who should never have had to be this competent. The courage of someone who learned bravery not from stories but from necessity. Dr. Chesik's hands were steady. She had been recording the entire encounter on her datapad, and when Marin looked at her, the station director's face held an expression that was beyond professional interest, beyond scientific documentation. It was the face of someone who had just watched a 14-year-old child de-escalate a territorial conflict between two apex predators using nothing but her voice and her willingness to stand in the current. "That," Dr. Chesik said quietly, "will be chapter 1 of my monograph." The storm passed. The water receded. The camp was salvageable. Thale's trap lines were rebuilt in 2 days, improved with structural modifications she had been considering for weeks and now had the excuse to implement. Rithan helped, her old hands finding purpose in the knotting and lashing, learning the craft of survival from a child who had invented it. Dr. Chesik documented everything, her datapads filling with observations that would reshape an entire field of xenoecology. Marin provided the mechanical work, reinforcing joints, fabricating connectors from salvaged hull material, building the infrastructure that turned Thale's ingenuity into permanence. In the days that followed, something shifted in the compound. The 4 of them, the crashed pilot, the old Sethani elder, the scientist, and the child, moved around each other with the unconscious coordination of a family that has survived something together and does not need to discuss what it meant. Rithan cooked, learning which roots to boil from the child who knew this coast the way water knows its channel. Dr. Chesik documented, her datapads filling with observations that would reshape xenoecology. Marin fixed things, traps, shelters, water systems. And when nothing was left to fix, she sat beside Thale and learned the subadults by their dorsal plate patterns, which was a kind of fixing too. And in the evening, when the sky cleared and the twin moons of Kelvon 6 rose over a coast that smelled of salt and wet stone and new growth, Thale sat on the basalt shelf above the river channel, and Vethan lay in the shallows below, and the sound they made together, the child's hum and the creature's low-frequency breath, carried across the water like a conversation that needed no words. Marin Ortegavas sat beside her. She did not speak. She did not need to. She had learned in 190 days on a planet she had never meant to visit that the most important things are not said. They are stayed. They are held. They are the choice to remain in the current and not leave, even when the water rises, even when the system says you should not be here, even when every reasonable calculation says you should go. Thale leaned against her shoulder, her ears relaxed, her breathing slowed. And Marin stayed. She stayed because that was what Vethan meant. The one who does not leave.